It all started a long time ago when some of my customers at the time, they were using the very old and original BIS processor, contacted me. They were shooting 4x5 and they were using the Mod 54 in combination with my processor to rotate and develop. Unfortunately, with the Mod 54, there is prongs in the middle, and what they were noticing was a very big, strong line of overdevelopment right across their sheets. It was at a time where I personally was starting to be interested into large format, so I was very interested into trying to solve the issue. One of the things that I tried first was this reel, which was available on the Thingiverse at the time. So I 3D printed this and just to test it. I even sent one to one of these guys to test, but very quickly we realized that it was really not optimal. It was difficult to load, and the biggest issue is that you see the sheet was not staying in place properly. On top of that, it was creating that big bow here, which made the sheets touch each other. It still got me started and really got hooked up on shooting large format and getting the beautiful, very large negatives. So that started me on a quest of finding a better solution. The shape and form of BIS reel came pretty quickly, as you can see on that very first reel. It was just a test, just for one sheet, to see how the loading would work. This reel was followed by a lot of iterations, lots of testing, and very quickly I also discovered that any features on the reel is actually bad for development. This one was loading from the side, very bad ID. It was not very convenient, and as you can see, the emulsion could touch the center very easily, and that would be pretty nasty on your negatives. But right away I could see that all of these holes, all of these little features there could create marks on your development, on your negative. So I came up with something simplified, same style loading, much simpler, but all of this was still too much. And especially at the bottom, all of these would create what lots of people call streaks on their negatives. I prefer to call them accelerated flows because that's actually what happens during the development. Each feature that the liquid find create an accelerated flow, and if the liquid is accelerated over your negative, it's going to create an area of overdevelopment. Here is a few different examples, and quickly I went back to the loading I wanted, but this time, instead of just a simple slot, I made a lot more space so the sheet could actually go in, and that was the very beginning of what BIS reel would become. Then came lots of iterations, same concept, but here the problem was that little shelf on the outside would create a drip that would go inside the slot. And that drip would create overdevelopment around the area that it was going to. On top of that outside shelf, the notch on the inside was also a problem, because if your reel was only loaded with one sheet, the liquid would go through and also create overdevelopment there. Same thing for the bottom. All those layer features there would create bad flow that would mark the film during development. So I tried a few things. It went through an iteration with that shelf on the side that would be open. Same thing, those little bars there would create overdevelopment. I tried to make it fully open, but as you can see, it's broken because it's physically not possible to stay in that position. So I went back to having something in between, but same problems were rising every time, until I came up with what we call now the Mark 1. The Mark I worked pretty well. It was easy to load. All the bad features that were present originally were removed, top and bottom, very open, the minimum possible geometry in the way of the chemistry. A holding spring was added to the top so it can squeeze onto the column of the tank, and in case of use in rotation, it would actually go with the tank properly. Quick side note on how I was actually seeing results and seeing what the reel was doing and if it was creating any of these accelerated flow marks. Was a simple setup. I would take a sheet out in the dark bag, take it out, position to that, and use the flash on top of that layer box to expose the film to light. Then I would develop it. It would give me a very black sheet, and when scanning, I would really push the scanner to see everything I could see. That would give me a fingerprint basically of the reel and what it would produce. Like that, I could judge on the evenness of the development. The Mark I was good and did perform okay. One thing was this area here. The printing process is not perfect, and sometimes on some rare reels, at the seam would actually be a hole, and it would allow some liquid to actually stay inside the hollow areas there, which was obviously an issue. The second issue was that the walls here in the back were smooth. It required a lot of sanding by hand, which was very tedious to do. But because they were smooth, the anti-aliasing layer would get stuck behind the sheet. So without the proper, very strong pre-wash, you would end up with a developed sheet and some AH residue in the back, which is not a very difficult thing to remedy because you can just dip your sheet in developer, takes 30 seconds and the anti-aliasing layer is gone. But still something that I wanted to improve on. Comes the Mark II. The Mark II introduced a few new things. First, those solid areas were replaced by hollow areas. So any liquid going in would come out the way it came in very easily. The pressure on the back of the film was reduced by a good bit. And more importantly, the back wall now had little divots inside. So those little divots were allowing a little more flow, a little more liquid to go behind the sheet and clear the AH layer. Even with those divots, it still required a good pre-wash. Not as strong as with the Mark I, but still necessary. The Mark II also needed to have the sanding done by hand to the back wall, so it would be very smooth and would not create any issue on the film. The Mark II was a very good reel. You can go to my website or to my Instagram and you will see 99% of the 4x5 work that I have on there was developed with the Mark II. It just necessitated to have a very strong pre-wash. Unfortunately, lots of people don't read the manual and some of them would contact me and completely forgot to do the pre-wash. So obviously had some issues with the anti-aliasing layer, or they wouldn't read and forget to practice before developing their first sheet. Practice is obviously quite important before you load it with any important work or something that you really care for. Also, the performances of the Mark II in rotation were not as good as I wanted them to be. They were okay, and I know a good number of people were using it in rotation and had no issue with it, but I wanted to do better. So on top of making it easier to use, a little more foolproof, that's where the Mark III comes in. So one of the first Mark III prototype came in. The one thing I changed for better rotation, I realized that on the Mark II, I had a double curve here, so the film would have a little bit of space behind it, so it would touch only in one spot. That double curve made the film take a shape that was actually not circular, as you can see. That shape not being circular in rotation means that the chemistry has a little more trouble climbing the wall on one side than the other. So the first thing I did with the Mark III is ensure that the sheet would actually go in to have as good as a curve as possible. So the chemistry would actually roll around the sheet properly. That reel actually went to a couple beta testers. After some back and forth, it was working pretty well. The retaining spring now was actually integrated on the inside of the reel, which is a very good improvement. It saves in height too. The geometry itself is much easier for me to manipulate. So I was able to iterate very quickly with it. Another thing I tried, especially for the rotation, was that reel. And that reel has something very special with it. The sheet actually goes in with an helicoidal shape. The goal was for the liquid to actually be going one way and the other to accelerate the flow across the sheet in the length. That proved to actually be a very bad idea. The results in testing with the black sheets were very, very bad. But the normal Mark III gave me the best results in rotation I've ever seen. Pretty much as good as inversion. I could not really see any differences between the inversion sheets and the rotation sheets. Another big improvement is that now, because of the shape of that back wall, we have a lot more space behind the sheet. So the anti-aliasing can really be removed much easier. As you can see, the loading stays the same. Very easy, very simple. One of the things that came up during the beta testing was to add dimples, so people could actually have numbers for each sheet, which I did. And I find it very, very practical when you're in the dark. You can really know which sheet you already loaded. You can start with the 1, you load the sheet. You can feel your way around to number 2, load the sheet, and it's really, really efficient that way. So this was the final Mark III design. Unfortunately, just before the release, an idea came up. And this idea was to actually integrate a tube for the back wall. With that Mark III, the wall was still the contact of the 3D printed plastic with the sheet. It still required sanding, which is not a perfect science. And while it was okay, when the idea of integrating a PTFE tube came up, I could not pass it on. So I basically scrapped a dozen of that version of the reel. It didn't make any sense to actually release it in that shape. So came up that little tube here, which is PTFE, which is a very, very slippery material. It avoids any scratches to happen. And the big thing is that now the contact is extremely limited with the back of the sheet. That very limited contact makes the anti-aliasing removal extremely, extremely easy, and the loading too. So this is the version of the reel you get now for the Mark III reel when you order it. Obviously yours is not going to be 2 colors. When I do prototypes, I use whatever plastic I have at hand, and obviously I didn't have enough of the blue, so it ended up finishing in white. The Mark III is now available in many sizes, so go check out the website. If you shoot 8x10, if you shoot 5x7, if you shoot 4x5, 9x12, you will find a reel to help you develop your film. That Mark III design, as I said earlier, is actually easy to manipulate for me. So I will also be offering to do custom reels. If you are shooting some old or weird formats, just contact me. The only thing you will need to do is send me a sheet so I can actually test it when I'm doing the prototyping. I've been contacted by people a few times about doing 4.5 by 6.5, I think, and 5 by 8. The one that stuck to me was a very large panoramic format, 4 by 10. That person didn't go through at sending me a sheet of 4 by 10, so I couldn't do it. But if somebody wants it, they just need to send me a sheet of film, and I'll be very happy to design a brand new one just for that format. The main thing I want you to live with is that when you are choosing a reel, just think about what is going to happen in the tank. If you are looking at something that has features like this or like this, just know that these features, if you rotate them, are going to create those accelerated flow and will mark your film. Even with inversion, those on top, with inversion, the liquid is going to be accelerated there and it's going to create issues on your film. Small or big features like this reel is something available online for free. This is, if you rotate this, those big openings there, yes, they will provide a lot of liquid to go on your sheet, but eventually they will create bad flows that are going to be creating lines and marks and streaks all over your film. The Mark III is the best reel you can find. It's extremely efficient in both ways, rotation and inversion. I hope you learned a few things, and I hope you enjoyed the history on how the Beaz reel came to be, the different iteration, what's new with the Mark III. If you are interested in getting into large format or continue your journey in large format, click the link below.